I shut down the final terminal window at exactly 9:03 p.m. 12 hours. 12 straight hours of server migration. And I want you to understand what that actually means, because it's not glamorous. It's not the kind of thing you describe at dinner parties. It's sitting in a chair that stopped being comfortable around hour 4, drinking coffee that stopped being warm around hour 6, and staring at cascading lines of data with the focused desperation of someone defusing a bomb that nobody else can see. But here's the thing about that moment when it finally works. No errors, no data loss, no 11 p.m. Slack message from a VP asking why the database is returning null values on every query. Just silence. Just the low hum of a startup office. The kind of office that has a ping pong table nobody uses and motivational quotes on the walls about disruption and vision and boldness. An office pretending, convincingly, that it was bigger than it really was. My name is Jamal, and I was going home. I packed my laptop slowly, and for the first time in 12 hours, I let myself think about tomorrow morning. Balloons. I had balloons in the trunk of my car, pink and silver, tied in a bundle. Pancake batter, the kind from scratch, not the box, because my daughter Dakira had expressed very strong opinions about box pancake mix the previous spring, and I had learned to respect those opinions. And a pink unicorn banner, folded carefully in my backpack because I did not trust myself to remember it otherwise. She was turning 8. 8 years old. I want to sit with that number for a second, because parents will know what I mean. There's something about a birthday. Not Christmas, not a vacation, not some grand planned event. Specifically a birthday. Specifically this birthday that lands differently. Because birthdays are the one day of the year that belongs entirely to them. It's the anniversary of the exact moment they arrived and changed everything. And when you're a parent, you carry a quiet, low-grade terror of missing it. Not just the party, the morning. The moment they wake up and the world is supposed to feel different and you're supposed to be there, already awake, already smiling, already part of making it real. Dakira's birthday. I was not going to miss that. That's when I heard the sound. Not loud, nothing dramatic, just the sharp, specific exhale of someone realizing something has gone very wrong. I almost didn't look. I was already calculating. Parking garage, car, highway, home, shower, balloons. I had the sequence planned. I was in motion, mentally, even before my feet started moving. But I glanced. And through the glass wall of the conference room, I saw Richard Pemberton. Now, let me tell you about Richard. Richard Pemberton was the CEO. Founder, technically, though the company had grown enough that founder felt like a more flattering description of what was now primarily a fundraising and relationship management role. He was the kind of man who wore expensive watches ironically and gave very compelling talks about company culture that everyone applauded and no one could quite explain afterward. He shook hands the way politicians shake hands, both of his, wrapping yours, holding it a beat too long, making you feel seen for exactly as long as it served his purposes. I didn't dislike him. I want to be clear about that. He wasn't a villain. He was just Richard. A man shaped entirely by decades of people solving his problems before he had to sit with them long enough to feel their weight. And right now, Richard Pemberton was hunched over his laptop like it had personally betrayed him. His fingers stabbed at the keyboard in that way people do when they're not sure what they're doing, but feel that doing something is better than accepting what's happening. Then they froze. He leaned back, rubbed his forehead, and whispered something under his breath that I'm fairly confident wasn't a prayer. I should have kept walking. I want to be honest with you about that. The correct decision, the decision that served my interests, the decision Dakira's future morning self would have voted for unanimously, was to keep walking. Instead, I knocked lightly on the door. "You good?" 2 words, that's all it was, and he looked up at me like I had just thrown him a rope from the surface of the water. "My presentation's gone," he said. "Corrupted file. I've got a pitch Monday. This is a major Monday, not a regular Monday, and I cannot walk in there without this deck. This cannot happen." He said that last part like the situation had not yet received his permission to exist, like reality was still open to negotiation. I stepped inside. "I'd like to tell you I did it because I'm a good person. Maybe that's part of it. But the more honest answer is that I'm an engineer, and corrupted files are, to an engineer, less of a crisis and more of a puzzle. And I have never once in my life been able to walk past a puzzle that needed solving. Let me take a look." 5 minutes in, I already knew the shape of the problem. The data wasn't gone. That was the good news. Corrupted doesn't always mean lost. And in this case, the file's structure was damaged, but the underlying content was, with patience and the right approach, retrievable. But here's the thing about with patience. Patience takes time. "This could take a few hours," I said, carefully, the way a doctor says this might be uncomfortable before doing something that will definitely be uncomfortable. Richard exhaled. Long, slow, like a man releasing 4 hours of accumulated panic in a single breath. "Perfect," he said. "Do whatever you need. Perfect." He said it like the problem was already solved, like my willingness to look had somehow become a guarantee of outcome. And I stood there for a moment. In my mind, not dramatically, not in slow motion, but in the quick, practical way the brain makes calculations under pressure, I ran through what a few hours actually meant. Balloons in the trunk. Pancake batter on the counter at home, mixed and ready because I had prepared it the night before, like the optimistic, organized, slightly naive father I was. The pink unicorn banner in my backpack, folded along the seams so it would hang cleanly. Dakira waking up, padding out to the kitchen in her pajamas, the ones with the little foxes on them, her current favorite, looking around, expecting me there. And then I thought about what it feels like to be the person who sees someone drowning and keeps walking. Even when the drowning is metaphorical. Even when the water is a corrupted PowerPoint file and the drowning man is a CEO who would survive this professionally and personally and in every measurable way, even if you walked out that door right now. There's something in some of us. I don't know if it's a gift or a flaw or both, and I've spent a lot of time not being sure, that makes walking away feel like a verdict on who you are. Not on who he is, not on whether the situation is fair, on who you are. I pulled out a chair. I'll see what I can do. By midnight, my shoulders had formed opinions about my posture that they weren't keeping to themselves. By 12:30, I had cycled through every playlist I'd ever made and landed on the kind of ambient electronic music that you only listen to when you're deep enough into something that melody feels like an intrusion. By 1 a.m., I had enough information to know something I hadn't wanted to know. This wasn't going to be a 3-hour job. And Richard Pemberton had not gone home. He had positioned himself behind me with the specific energy of a man who is not technical enough to help, but is too anxious to leave. He was the human equivalent of a loading bar, present, visible, contributing nothing to the actual process, but somehow making everyone aware that time was passing. Almost there? Shouldn't be too difficult for someone like you, right? You're the expert. I trust you. I kept my voice neutral. It's a skill, neutrality. It looks like calm, but it's actually a form of energy management. You have a finite amount of bandwidth, and you make choices about where it goes. I was choosing to put mine into the recovery script I was building, line by careful line. Around 2 a.m., Richard sighed in the way that people sigh when they want you to notice they are sighing. "My IT guy usually handles this kind of thing," he said. I didn't want to bother him on the weekend." I stopped typing. Not long enough for him to notice. Just one beat, half a second. The amount of time it takes for something to land. Because here's what I heard in that sentence. Not what he said, what I heard. He had someone whose job this was. He had made a choice, a conscious, reasonable, entirely defensible choice not to call that person on a weekend. And then I had walked past a glass door and been too kind to keep walking, And now it was 2 a.m., and I was rebuilding a stranger's presentation data with a silent office around me, while the birthday decorations in my car did not inflate themselves, and the pancake batter on my counter waited patiently for a morning that was getting shorter by the hour. This wasn't an emergency. Let me say that again, because it's important, because I think a lot of us have been in this room metaphorically, and we need to name what's happening in it. This was not an emergency. An emergency is a situation where someone is genuinely without options, where the stakes are real and immediate and the harm of inaction is significant. An emergency makes your help necessary. This was convenience. His convenience. And my night. My morning. Dakara's face at 6:58 a.m., looking around a kitchen and not finding me there. I kept working anyway, because I had made a choice. Back there at the door, before my brain caught up with my mouth, I had made a choice. And there's a version of integrity that is specifically about honoring the choices you make before you know their full cost. Most acts of genuine decency happen at this exact moment. Not when it's noble, but when it's inconvenient, and you do it anyway. At 3:42 a.m., the first recovered slide appeared. I'm not going to pretend that wasn't satisfying. It was. That is the other complicated truth of this story. That even in the middle of something that was costing me something real, the work itself felt like something. The moment data resolves from noise is, for an engineer, quietly beautiful. It is the closest thing to a resurrection that our field offers. Slide 1, then slide 2. Then the full deck, frame by frame, assembling itself with the patient inevitability of something that had never really been gone, just hidden. At 3:58 a.m., the full presentation had rebuilt itself. I leaned back. It's done. Richard Pemberton clapped me on the shoulder, the clap of a man whose problem has been solved. Fantastic, he said. You're a lifesaver, seriously. And then, and I want you to pay attention to what happened next, because it is the moment this story actually becomes about something. He pulled the laptop toward him and began tweaking bullet points. No question about how long I'd been there. No acknowledgement that it was 3:58 in the morning. No offer of anything. Not compensation. Not even the ritual acknowledgement that one human offers another when they have received something significant. Not even the thing we say to delivery drivers, to mechanics, to strangers who help us in parking lots. Just relief. His Monday was safe. The world had returned to the correct order. I packed up my things quietly. I didn't say anything. Not because I was being passive, but because in that moment I made a clear-eyed decision about where my energy belonged. And it did not belong in that room. I left before he could ask for anything else. When I got home, the sky had moved from black to that particular shade of gray that happens exactly between night and dawn. The color of the world deciding what kind of day it wants to be. 4:27 a.m. I showered fast, changed, went downstairs. And then I did something that I think about sometimes when I need to remind myself what it looks like to choose something deliberately. I blew up the balloons. At 4:30 in the morning, standing in my kitchen, slightly dizzy from exhaustion and balloon inflation, I tied pink and silver balloons to the backs of chairs. I climbed on a step stool and taped the unicorn banner across the wall. Slightly crooked, because at 4:30 a.m. your spatial judgment is not your most reliable faculty, but crooked in a way that somehow made it feel more genuine. I set out the things for pancakes. I arranged the small wrapped gifts on the table, and then I lay down on the couch. Not to sleep exactly. I had done the math, and there was not enough time for sleep that would leave me functional. I lay down to rest, to be horizontal for a moment, to let my body know that I was aware of what I had asked of it. At 6:58 a.m., small footsteps came down the hallway. I know those footsteps. Parents know their children's footsteps the way musicians know chords. Light and quick and slightly uneven because she always lands heavier on her right foot. The fox pajamas. Dakira. I closed my eyes. An old bit of ours, the fake sleeping dad, the suspicious kid. She'd been on to me since she was 4, but we kept the game going because it was ours. Daddy? I opened one eye. She was standing in the entrance to the living room, and she was looking at the decorations the way children look at things that are better than they'd imagined. Not just happy, but slightly stunned, like the world had exceeded its own terms. "You did all this?" "Of course," I said. Voice rough in the way voices are rough at 6:58 a.m. after no meaningful sleep. Birthday girl deserves it. She studied me. Children do this. They look at you, really look, with a directness that adults train themselves out of because it's too intimate for most of the interactions our world requires. Dakira looked at my face the way she sometimes looks at books, trying to understand something important. "I heard you come in," she said. Quiet, not accusing, just factual. It was still dark. Had to help someone. She held that for a second, and then her face changed. "Like a superhero?" I laughed. Not the polite laugh, not the tired laugh, but the real one, the kind that comes from somewhere underneath the exhaustion and finds its way out anyway. But something also caught in my throat. Because I was thinking, is that what this is? This staying when you should have gone, this fixing what isn't yours to fix, this 3:58 a.m. and no thank you and a banner hung crooked in the gray of early morning. Is this the superhero version? Because it didn't feel like that in the conference room. It felt like a complicated series of choices made in the dark. "Yeah," I said softly. "Something like that." She nodded, completely satisfied. The kind of satisfied that only children can be. The kind that doesn't require more information because the essential fact has been established and everything else is detail. And then she launched herself at me. Full speed, no hesitation, the absolute trust that I would catch her, which I did. And I held Dakira there in the living room, with the crooked banner and the balloons and the pancake batter waiting. And I thought about Richard Pemberton, opening his laptop in an empty office and adjusting bullet points. And I thought about what recognition actually is. Here's what nobody tells you about doing the right thing. Nobody tells you that it often looks, in the moment, indistinguishable from doing the wrong thing for yourself. It doesn't come with a score. There's no signal that arrives to confirm you've made the correct choice. You just make it in the dark. And then you live in what it costs you. And then somewhere on the other side of the cost, if you're fortunate, you find out what it was actually for. Richard Pemberton would go into that Monday pitch and likely perform well. He would use the word seamless at some point. He would not think about 3:58 a.m. He would not think about Jamal, the engineer who stayed. People like Richard are not villains for this. They are simply unaware, in the way that people are unaware of most of what the world does on their behalf. But here's what I understood, holding Dakira in a living room that smelled like balloons and the very beginning of a birthday morning. Recognition doesn't always come from the person you help. We are built, many of us, maybe most of us, to look for acknowledgement from the person on the receiving end of our effort. We want the thank you. We want the, "I see what you did and it mattered." We organize our sense of worth around the response of the people we've given something to. And when that response doesn't come, or comes small, or comes in the wrong form, we feel the deficit of it acutely. But recognition is not a transaction. It doesn't have to flow from the recipient. Dakira didn't know about the server migration. She didn't know about the 12 hours before the corrupted file. She didn't know about the exit I almost made at 9:03 p.m. and the choice I made at 9:04. She didn't know the cost because I hadn't shown it to her, because some things are yours to carry and not theirs to bear. What she knew was this: it was still dark when her father came home, and he had stayed somewhere anyway because someone needed help, and the balloons were there in the morning. That was enough information for her to build a story about who her father was. And I realized, sitting there, that this is how character is actually constructed. Not in the moments when people are watching, not in the performances we offer in public, not in the choices we make when the cost is low and the audience is large. Character is constructed at 2 a.m. in empty offices, when someone whose job it isn't your problem mutters about their weekend IT guy, and you decide whether that's the moment you stand up or the moment you stay seated. It's constructed in the gap between what's owed and what you give. And the person watching you make those choices might not always be the person you're helping. It might be the person in the fox pajamas who heard you come home in the dark and filed it away under what my father is. I'm not telling you this story because I want credit for that night. I genuinely don't. The morning settled something in me that didn't require external validation anymore. The crooked banner settled it. The launch across the living room settled it. I'm telling you this because I think a lot of us are standing at that conference room door right now, in some version of it, a moment where the easy thing is to keep walking and the hard thing is to knock. And the cost of knocking is something real. Your time, your energy, your sleep, your mourning, some portion of yourself that you will not get back. And I'm not here to tell you that you always stay. You don't always stay. Some nights you walk past the glass door and you're right to do it. Some situations genuinely don't need you. Some versions of Richard have people on call and resources available, and you are not the solution. You're just the most convenient one. And discerning the difference matters. But when you do stay, when you make the choice, and it costs what it costs, and there's no recognition coming from the person across the desk, know that the recognition is still possible. Know that it might come, quietly, in a different room, from someone who wasn't there for the doing, but has been watching all their life for the evidence of who you are. Dakira is 8 years old today. She thinks her father is something like a superhero. And I genuinely think, that the only way to justify that belief is to keep earning it. Not for Richard, not for the Monday pitch, not for any performance or reward or acknowledgement that might or might not arrive. For Dakira, for the crooked banner, for the thing you become when nobody is watching, except the person who matters most. That's worth more than any bonus. That's worth more than being seen. That's the whole thing.